Hey everyone, so I'm back finally after a million years, and this is Iris. She is a rare INTP female creature. They are very hard to find and very smart. She was actually going to initially be a part of all my videos, but
Which now I'm not sure how I was planning on doing it because I'm very nervous.
but she is my best friend, and she is the person I brainstorm all this stuff with and have endless conversations about all the things, and I feel like she has a really good grasp on it. So I invited her today to help explain the things. So today's video is going to be probably my last, I'd like to say, long overarching video, but I'm hoping this will have like all of the good stuff that you guys need to fully understand so that I can start making other content, which I've got some good ideas on, such as, like how Myers-Briggs can help in relationships and things of that nature. But first, I've got to make sure that I explain the system well, so hence the support. So we're titling this video MBTI Functions and Form Breakdown, and you can thank Iris for that. But yes, so to start off on this, the first point we wanted to talk about was that everybody has a sensing, an intuitive, a feeling, and a thinking function. So when you're getting your 4-letter code, it's just that, it's a code. But just because you get, say, ISTJ does not mean you don't have an intuitive, an N, and you have all the letters, essentially.
So it's a common misconception with Myers-Briggs that because 2 letters are the ones that are featured in that little code and that little formula, that those are the only 2 letters that are prominent in someone's personality type.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's, a lot of professional articles, which I will probably make a video discussing in the near future by people with PhDs who should know this stuff, seem to misunderstand and think that Myers-Briggs pigeonholes people, which I know I've mentioned slightly before, but thinking that it pigeonholes people, saying that you're just a thinker or you're just a feeler, which it doesn't. It like I said before, it is your preferences. So that was the first point I wanted to make. Alright, so point 2 with better lighting is going to be the difference between the learning and the decision-making functions, and then I guess we'll briefly explain, the difference of like what those are, so defining them as well as the differences. But I will turn that over to Iris over here because she does an amazing job of explaining it.
Well, now you're building me up too much, and I don't know if I appreciate it.
Well.
But the difference between the learning and decision-making functions is really what they do for you. So all of the learning functions are going to be how you're experiencing life and how you're taking in any information. And that can be conceptual, like in an intuitive way, or it can be sensing. And so there's a couple different versions of that, which we'll get into in a minute, for sensing, and a couple different versions for intuition.
And maybe we should briefly just say exactly which ones are the learning and decision-making.
That's what I was saying, is intuition and sensing, and then we were going to get to the introverted and extroverted.
But yes, so you have your intuition and your sensing, which are your learning functions, and then thinking and feeling, which are your decision-making functions.
And decision-making functions are the ones that, that's the information that you're going to have most access to. So, and that's going to be how you're evaluating the world through this information that you have access to. So, for the learning functions, whereas that's gathering and experiencing, the information is going to be the kind of information it's most able to get out of the world. So that's the 2 top half functions that you'll see. They represent your most dominant versions of thinking or feeling, whichever one is your dominant one, and sensing or intuition, whichever one is your dominant one, and whether or not that's introverted or extroverted, which could take us into our next point.
Point of, I guess we should list the learning functions, and then we'll talk about those, and then list the decision-making functions. But the learning functions, the introverted learning functions first, are going to be introverted sensing and introverted intuition, extroverted sensing, and extroverted intuition. So that'll be in your code, your 4-letter code. That'll be the S or the N. And so you've got your introverted sensing, introverted intuition, extroverted intuition. That's what you need to know for the learning. And for decision-making functions, you're going to have introverted thinking, introverted feeling, extroverted feeling. So now I'll turn it over to Iris to explain the nitty-gritty a little better.
Yeah, so the scope kind of the function are different. You can have either an introverted or an extroverted version of each. So just because everyone has a sensing function doesn't mean that all of their sensing functions are going to be the same. You could have someone with an introverted sensing or someone with an extroverted sensing, and that's going to look really different. Same with intuition, feeling, and thinking. So when it comes to the scope of things, introversion and extroversion for the function itself kind of changes what kind of information you're getting. Like from a feeling perspective, the introverted version is going to be a little bit more narrow but long-sighted, long-reaching if you think of it like a scope. Versus the extroverted feeling information is going to be a little bit less narrow but more broad. It's going to be able to see more information but not as deeply into it. And that same is true of introverted thinking and extroverted thinking. Introverted thinking is going to be a little bit more narrow and long-sighted as far as going deeper into it, whereas extroverted thinking is going to be more broad and a little bit more short-sighted in that.
So I can just add a quick note on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
A good way to give an example is, so I'm an INTJ, as I said, and Amber's an INTP. So we both use different thinking functions. Mine is the extroverted thinking, hers the introverted thinking, which is one of the reasons I felt like she would be so good for helping with this video, is because she's able to really explain those details in a more in-depth way, whereas I have more strength at kind of explaining the whole, and I understand it well, but when it comes to explaining, the very specific details, which is important with the system to fully understand it, that would be where TI really shines.
And it is a little bit different for the learning functions than it is for the decision-making functions. Kind of like I was just saying how the decision-making functions work with that feeling and thinking. With that intuition and sensing, extroverted sensing is going to be more broad in the information it's taking from the world. It's going to be very hands-on and experiencing the world in a broad way. Whereas introverted sensing is going to be more narrow in a personal way of how just you are experiencing the world. And of course, seeing that in other people. In a lot of ways, it's similar to the intuitive function for functions for learning as well. The extroverted intuition is much more broad. It's seeing connections and conceptual connections in lots of different areas, whereas the introverted intuition is deeper but more narrow. It can see in these specific areas.
Fun fact, between the two of us, we share all of those functions.
Woo! Yeah!
Is another reason I think she is a wonderful partner for this. So I have the introverted intuition and the extroverted thinking, and then the introverted feeling and the extroverted sensing. And
whereas I've got the introverted thinking and the extroverted intuition, and the introverted sensing and the extroverted feeling is my little inferior function.
So I imagine we probably explained that.
Mm-hmm. I think
probably
that's
as much as they want to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
And now for point 4, for us the second time, just so everyone knows,
we lost footage.
lost a whole lot of really good, really adorable footage.
So if I do so much worse this time, you'll never know that I was better the first time around.
We were quite adorable.
Let's just assume I did really good the first time.
I mean, she did.
That way, if I do bad, you're like, "Ow!" But she did so good the first time.
Right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so fortunately, we're just adorable. So I'm just new adorable here. Okay, so our fourth point is going to be the formula. And Amber created a really awesome way to explain / understand this. This was the hardest part for me to grasp when I was learning Myers-Briggs. So if you struggle at first, to get this, that's totally fine. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will respond to all the things. And, excuse me, can edit that out later.
Yeah, okay.
And, yes. And so, on to Iris.
Yes, so I drew it up on a little marker board here. Don't know if you can see that well. Well, I have to write on it, so I can't write on it while you're holding it up. So again, I can't write on it while she's holding it up. We have officially determined, but I'll hold this up a little bit closer so you guys can see. Stop it, you're distracting me. Sorry. I don't know if you're distracting them, but you're definitely distracting me.
Pay attention to this.
Stop.
To this.
Shh. So, now I'm all out of sorts. Thank you.
Sorry.
No.
So I can see the
Stop touching it. Okay. So the J and the P is actually kind of the key to the formula. What it determines is whether or not the function that goes here in your formula, that 4-letter code, is an I or an E. Yes. So I'm messing this up so bad.
It's okay.
So for P, an E always comes first with their intuition or sensing function, and an I always comes second for their thinking or feeling function.
And it might be a little confusing just to explain it. So it's going to be, it's not that second or third thing is going to be a literal I or E. It's going to be the introverted or extroverted version of the function.
Yes, thank you. I'm so sorry. Yes, exactly that. So for an INTJ, for example, I'm going to switch to this side so I can actually write on it. You're going to have an I here, so it'll make it easier to understand. If I can do it with my chin on the board. It's supposed to be a T, not a J. Okay, so for an INTJ, that means that this intuition is going to be introverted because it's in that first slot, and that thinking function is going to be extroverted, so it's going to be extroverted thinking because it's in the second slot.
So you got introverted intuition, extroverted thinking for your top two functions.
All J's, that's the order that the introversion and the extroversion of the functions go. All N's that are J's have introverted intuition, and all T's that are J's have extroverted thinking. And all S's that are J's have introverted sensing, and all F's that are J's have extroverted feeling. So it stays like that. And same with P's in the opposite order. Now what determines which one of your functions is dominant and which one's the auxiliary function or your secondary function is what you are. So that's why it's so important to understand that introversion and extroversion isn't just, how outgoing or reserved you are. It's where you get your energy. If you're around people a lot, are you going to end up feeling really recharged by being around people a little bit more often? Or are you going to feel pretty drained to be around people a lot that week?
Of course, like, a lot of people can get drained being around people, even if you are an extrovert. It's really just like, if you kind of look at your life, like what's been consistently the case, because I want to make a video in the future. We've talked about how mental health can play into this. Lots of things can play into this, but if you can look at your life over the whole scope, it's like, do you need to go alone?
Get your energy?
Yeah, do you need time alone typically to recharge, or when you feel like you're exhausted, do you need to like go out and see friends to recharge your battery?
Barring, of course, just depression, needing to see friends to recharge your mental health battery, so to speak. But yeah, so if you're an introvert, that's going to mean that your introverted function is the dominant one. It doesn't matter which order they go in. So over here, we'll do me.
And just to point out before, just so they can have it in their minds, so even though we've only got one letter different with this P, all of our functions are different. Like, she doesn't have any functions I do, and I don't have any functions she does.
Because I have the opposite type as her.
Mm-hmm.
So for my my introverted function is my thinking. So I don't share NI at all, introverted intuition. I have introverted thinking, and that's my first function. And extroverted intuition is my second function automatically because this one's my first. Just like effectiveness or extroverted thinking. Sorry, a little slip there from personality hacker. Extroverted thinking is her auxiliary function. And so I think that's a good little overview of how...
and do you want to real quick just put an E on the front just to show them how that changes?
Yeah.
So we'll put an E just to kind of so you can visualize
so if I
a
were,
little
or
better.
if we were talking about an ENTP, then that would mean that their extroverted intuition was their first function, was their dominant function. And then introverted thinking would be their secondary function because of that.
So just be the first, they'd be
Their auxiliary.
flipped from what she has instead of her.
No, this would still be extroverted, just like mine, and this would still be introverted. It's just which one was the dominant and which one was the auxiliary would be different, just shifted.
So at risk of over-explaining, I'll just say, so for her, her dominant function or driver function is introverted thinking, and her auxiliary or co-pilot function is extroverted intuition. But if she were an extroverted, ENTP, it would be the same functions, but instead her dominant function would be the extroverted intuition or exploration, and her auxiliary or co-pilot function would be that introverted thinking. So hopefully you understand that now, I imagine.
And that would be probably a good segue to go into our last point, which is
Yes.
showing how that breaks down in the dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and, and inferior function.
Yes.
Sorry.
So on to our last point. So when writing these notations, you're always going to write, whether it's extroverted or introverted, little next to the, thinking, feeling, sensing, whatever. So you have the capital N, lower I, meaning introverted intuition. Probably over-explained that a lot, but that's fine. So my auxiliary...
You can see that right there and everything as it
Exactly.
tracks down.
So since this is introverted, my next function is going to be extroverted.
Just like you see right there.
And since, I'm a top half thinker, it's going to be extroverted thinking. All right, so...
It goes around like this. So
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Here. You can see the numbers kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is going to be, my main function that is always going on. This is going to be something I'm really good at. This is going to be, my...
comfort spot, kind of a function you're really used to using, mainly because it links with your first function there, because they're both introverted or they're both extroverted. But you're not necessarily great at using it. You're better at using it than, your last function or than people who don't have it, but you definitely shouldn't be, using that as a top. Function, because you don't have the skills there. It's just not gonna happen.
If it's going to be a decision-making function there, or here, wherever it is, you don't want to be making big decisions with that function. That's a good way to put it. So,
yeah, I
for
think
this...
Personality Hacker says it that way, too.
I think so. So for this, I'll have introverted feeling, which be the F and the I.
Oh, goodness. Sorry, I'm backwards.
It's A-okay. We're so professional that we couldn't even figure out how to type things on the screen. If anyone else knows, please let me know. Message me, email me, KimberlyFrigg@gmail.com, or put in the comments. I already have it linked as my email for the thing.
Okay. Poor choices was fine.
Whatever. But yes, if anyone knows how to add the text to the videos or wants to send me tips, I still don't know what I'm doing. Please help.
Okay, so back to the
Anyways.
square. That's our one
Yes.
our one job right now.
One job. So my tertiary function is going to be that introverted feeling. Now my inferior function, which is my weakest function, my least developed. It's
going to be kind of difficult for you to pick up on as well, and it's going to come out in ways that you don't actually are not positive, wonderful uses of the function.
Now it does have some good uses, of course. Your inferior function, but it's going to be little things good for play or
good within the bounds of where it should be as an
Yes.
inferior function.
So that function for me is going to be extroverted sensing.
Which we don't need to get into what they are past
No, we'll do that in the
because
future.
we'll do that in another video, or she will, either way.
So I'll let
over
you do
here,
your own.
Since I am an I and my introverted thinking is introverted thinking, I'm going to lead with that. So that's going to be my dominant function. So rather than having a learning function as my driving dominant function, I have a evaluating function, a decision-making function. Then my secondary function is going to be that extroverted intuition, which is just the one that I'm not dominant in based on my introversion or extroversion. And that one, as Kimberly said, is a good guide to making decisions, a good guide to giving you information that this one needs. This is the lens that you see things through. This one fills in what you need to see or how to get that information that you need. Either way, depending on if you're a learning driver or a decision-making driver. This third function, tertiary function, is going to be SI for me, which is introverted sensing. And as she said, that's a function that, well, we already covered that. It. And then my tertiary function, because this is the flip, like this is extroverted intuition, so this one's automatically going to be introverted sensing, because it's the opposite. And that last one is going to be feeling, because my dominant function is thinking, and it's going to be extroverted since I'm introverted. And yeah, so I think that
so that
covers those pretty well. I don't want to be too...
So we'll go ahead and zoom it in. Just
yeah, let's get a good little zoom on
you want
those.
to screenshot it and reference it?
No,
I don't know.
don't.
It's whatever. But, so that hopefully explains that well, and you can kind of like visualize a little better how everyone has introverted and extroverted parts of them, and everyone has thinking, feeling, sensing, intuitive parts of them. It's just a matter of if it was an ISTJ, that sensing would be on the top. If it was the F, the feeling would be on top. So I hope that makes sense. That is the last point for this video. I hope we explained everything well. If you have any questions, of course, please leave them in the comments. I would love to hear from people. And for those of you who have sent me messages or commented, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. You guys have really helped to keep me inspired to keep going on this. So thank you,
That's
love you
true.
all.
You
Mwah.
have, so.
You guys are awesome.